Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about your favorite media. I am one of your hosts, Joe Perez, and I've got my stalwart companions with me on this weird stay at the supposedly haunted asylum. You've gotten used to him now. He's our resident third chair, and I'm glad he's here. Eric O'Day, how you doing, Eric?
Joe, I'm pretty good. I haven't got a ton of time to play Midnight, but I will say that I will do anything for Luma. I would delete World of Warcraft for Luma, the wiener dog, and I don't say that about a lot of things.
And we happen to know who created that little tiny dachshund. And then joining us on this journey is our resident skeptic. Since Matt couldn't be here, Liz was gracious enough to step in and will be the foil on our wacky journey discussing Warcraft lore. How you doing, Liz?
Hello. I would also do absolutely anything for Luma. If you want me to burn the world down, if there's a world tree you want me to destroy, anything for that dog. I'm sorry, but that's just where we stand.
I feel like we just recently stopped that from happening, so maybe not burn a world tree down. But
if Luma asked me to, if Luma gave you those puppy dog eyes, I don't know. It'd be a really hard call.
That's reasonable and fair. But friends, we're not going to be talking about burning trees down, or at least I don't think so, if I remember my topics here correctly. Instead, we're going to be answering questions from you, our wonderful listeners. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, we ask that you go ahead and send those in. You can send those into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Again, singular podcast. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you don't want to send us an email, you can go ahead and hit us up on Discord. We have 2 channels set aside. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open for everybody. Same rules apply. And if you are a Patreon supporter, as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on, we have the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you. First up, this is from Scribbly. Scribbly sent in many questions over the years, and we are grateful for that. And this one is about the current zone Zul'Aman a little bit. Mostly, it says, I'm currently working through Zul'Aman, having a great time, thanks. And I've decided that I would like to apply to be a Loa. How can I start? What do I need to accomplish in life or death or hellish outside the balanced liminal space to become revered by these lovely Amani? Tips on the best spirit animals to associate with, quantity of foes to behead, etc. is much appreciated. I'd like to avoid confrontation with existing Loa, so I'll need to occupy a virtue or space that is not already taken. Seems like victory, eagles, rats, and abundance are right out. I'm good at leaving most places worse than when I started, and being a murder vagabond. Although I just got my own place, so there's less vagabonding involved these days, and doing literally any task that anyone gives me. Probably, I'm guessing for decor here. I'm inserting this here. If you can help, I will keep it in mind after my ascension. So I got some really good news for you, and we're going to start with what the definition of a Loa is. And the good news is, we don't know, because it's super, super broad. Loa essentially refers to beings of sufficient power that are worshipped by trolls in general. It's a troll word. In their language, it essentially is the equivalent of a minor deity, demigod, house god, whatever you want to call it, that can occupy varying levels of power. And so, like you may have been familiar with Wamsamdi, Razan, Mwezala, and other Loa like that. Also, something that people often forget is that troll will refer to wisps as Loa. Like, even tiny minor spiritual entities like that are considered Loa to them, the spirits of ancestors, etc. So it's a very broad spectrum. And the power of these entities is directly correlated to the amount of worship. If you've ever played the game Black and White, it's very similar to that. Essentially, trolls are the micro-civilizations that you want to feed offerings into your coffers, make sacrifices in your name, wear your talismans, and generally just see you as a cool person or entity in the cosmos. And by that definition alone, you become a Loa. the more power that you have as a Loa is based off of how many followers you have and the quality of your worship. It's also why Loa can lose power. So it's a very broad spectrum indeed. And in fact, if you go through the list of Loa, there's been quite a number that we know about and a lot more that we probably don't, such as Gahun. Gahun, the blood god, which was made out of old god matter that was essentially electrified reanimator style until it got up and started walking around again by the Titan Watchers, excuse me. And then got improperly disposed of because that's just a thing that happens. Nobody taught the Titan Watchers proper lab safety protocol is really what it boils down to. Gahun was technically worshipped as a Loa by the Blood Trolls. There was also another Loa-ish entity inside of that same raid. When you went and fought, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head now, but it was basically made up of leftover pieces of Old God and Loa that were also being experimented on by the Titan Watchers that then fused into this insane like chimera of old Gaudy / Loa goodness. And then you had to go put it down because, again, nobody taught them proper safety protocol. They didn't know how to put it down. But we know that it was constructed of Loa material. We just don't happen to know which Loas it was. One head seemed to be serpentine, the other seemed to be avian, and one seemed to be a lion. And while it may be a reference to the old chimera, it definitely was a little weird, especially in an expansion that was followed up by, here's where all the things go that are spirits that then get reborn into the world. I don't know which three these were, but they didn't go here, that's for sure. So you could pick whatever kind of thing you want and just kind of do it. In a lot of these cases, these may have been trolls that or entities in life that did something great, partook in a great battle, or were beloved leaders or beloved spiritual influencers, kept their people safe, and over time their name became legend. And by becoming legend, they were worshipped, and because they were worshipped, they became Loa. That's the broad strokes of it, so to speak. And I'll turn it over to Eric if Eric has anything to add to it, because I mean, Loa again is a really broad topic.
Yeah, I would say that being a Loa is a bit of a nepo baby. If you're born into it, great, you're there. If you happen to be born a wild god, if you're an extremely powerful entity from the realms of life, you're pretty much in. You can just roll up to some trolls and they will just want to worship you. But yeah, as we've seen, there are people, there are entities that have become more powerful, become a Loa by, grinding it out. If you want to find a niche that you aren't competing against other Loa who already established, you can go really specific. Like you can be the Loa of hot beverages and you can just dedicate your life to that. And then maybe by the end of your long lifespan, you will be revered by your descendants to the point that they will, worship you a little bit and you'll be able to be like a little minor Loa. Sure, why not? I mean, if you're Scribbly, if you're really good at doing tasks anyone gives you for any reward, that's
Loa of the gig economy.
Yeah, being the Loa of grinding it out. As my 143rd unsuccessful attempt at Mimiron's head just this afternoon, that would make me a follower of you if you were the Loa of grinding it out, because there was even the possibility of a reward would mean that's something that a lot of people have in common and would want something to kind of focus on. They would need a Loa of. And my last point is that it sounds pretty risky. I would say you want to take care of your old Loa components and dispose of them properly. You don't want that coming back to future generations. You also want to know what you're getting into when you're being a Loa. Tribes of trolls have a tendency to kidnap and absorb the power from their Loa over the last few centuries. Many different groups of trolls have kind of, whether they just have that idea, whether they copy each other, every couple years we hear of another group of trolls who, hey, why aren't their Loa speaking to them anymore? Well, they tried to kill them and absorb their power. Same old. So definitely read the fine print before you get in.
Yeah. I have a question.
I was just going to ask
particularly about Zolaman, the quest in Zolaman, which You have the Loa and Zulaman, who have been out of touch with the people for precisely the reasons Eric has mentioned. But when they return, they seem to be very powerful forces. But by all accounts, or at least depending on who you talk to, they have not been worshipped in some time. The people feel abandoned. Their leaders certainly feel like they've been abandoned. So if the amount of worship is what makes you a Loa, how does this compute? Do they come forward and then they become more powerful as they demonstrate their power and thus fuel more belief and worship in them? Or have they just been subsisting, like, in hiding from Zul'jin and anyone who might have been akin with the same goals, and are coming back weaker but gaining in power? So that part kind of confuses me if we're going by this logic.
Sure, and it's a really good question, Liz. Thank you for that. And I guess let's give a little framework for it. So as you're questing in Zulaman, and mild spoilers if you have not done this yet, come back in a couple minutes. But we retread the story of Zul'jin a little bit and the legacy that Zul'jin left behind. And part of that is what Liz is referencing here, where you have like Halazi and I'm going to forget most of the names. I apologize. But you're going to have like all these different Halazi, Janalai. You're going to have Naralak. These Loa that we've seen before, and we've seen their power used before, because essentially they would be able to gift their power to champions. And this is a time-honored tradition of Loa to many of the trolls and their worshippers, especially in times of war and conflict. They would grant their powers to champions of the people that worship them in order to sort of provide for their people. It's sort of it's in your Loa orientation packet of things that you can do. But Zul'jin wanted to become the supreme champion of all of the Loa of the Amani, and didn't want to go through the hassle of, actually putting in the work. He didn't want to grind it out. So instead, he used dark and twisted methods to wrestle the power away from the four Amani worshipped Loa and shove them into his own champions, which is what we come across when we go into Zulaman and the various raids and like actually go and beat these guys up. This is stolen power that they're using. It's not actual power gifted to them by the Loa. So these Loa have gone into hiding. But the thing that the story sort of like it lays out in a obfuscated way, and it's very easy to miss. And it's especially true when you look at like the Halanzi and the Naralek portion of it. Naralek is essentially hibernating. He's in a pocket dimension, essentially, but still has worshippers. Their stories of Naralek are still being told. It's not as powerful necessarily, and if you even see that when Naralek wakes up, is Naralek doesn't murder you outright. He can't. He gives you a good fight and shows you fractions of his power, but he still has a speaker. He still has a high priestess. That high priestess is keeping the faith alive among, even if it's a small community, it's still a community that worships it. It's the same thing with Halazi. Halazi has an entire tribe that has disappeared from the Amani wilderness, hiding in the mists from the rest of the Amani trolls that continues to worship him. And that whole thing about the mist was Halazi using its power to protect his worshippers, and they still worship him. He had more power than the others. You have Janalai. Janalai is a dragon hawk, and that is sort of the symbol, the overarching symbol of the Amani, still being worshipped, even if it's not outright like sacrifices being made to him. And your journeys, as you're talking with the NPCs, they even say they've beseeched these Loa. They keep reaching out, and the Loa do not respond. How do you reach out to a Loa? How do you reach out to a sufficient powerful entity? You make sacrifices, you make worship, you make the prayers, you do whatever it is that your agreement had. And so they never really stopped worshiping them. It's just that certain people felt that they would never heed the call again. And I think that's really where that comes into. Right. And as soon as they come back, and the ones that were skeptical before and were like, oh, they're never going to answer our call, see them that they've in their time of need, they're being called, they're the powers there, that they haven't been forsaken by their gods, by their Loa, by the ones that they had the compact with to protect the Zulaman areas. They are immediately taking the knee. They're immediately, back to the old ways, but the old ways never really died. So yes, they were diminished potentially in power from where they once were, but now they're coming back and they're right back into the fray. I think had Xalatath taken the battlefield, it would have been much different, but she was just having minions essentially down there. Powerful minions, powerful entities of the void, but not nearly as much as, an army of trolls, a champion that walks through death, and, can treat Loa as if they're just like poker buddies, essentially. And then, the power of these Loa coming back and empowering the Amani people, it's still very powerful and very active. And I found that part of it fascinating because it really was a story of, the old ways don't necessarily always die out. And in particular, when you do like the Dragon Hawk and the Phoenix, the whole point of that is the ember still burns, right? It didn't go out. The light's still there. It just needs to be kindled. And that's what that is essentially. And it's sort of the glory of the Amani people. I think I got everything there. I'll turn it over if Eric's got anything to add.
Yeah, the other thing that I was thinking of is the time scale. We have to remember that the Amani have been here worshipping these Loa for 10,000, 16,000 years, whatever the exact number is. So a generation and a half of, a little bit of diminishment isn't going to be that much in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Did you have any other questions about that, Liz, or anything else you'd like clarification on as our resident skeptic here?
I think the real problem here is in becoming a Loa is that the best Loa has already been taken, which is Philo, the capybara Loa. So what are you going to do? How do you get any better than that? I don't know.
And I will throw in there the other thing that we didn't really talk about too is the mantle of that the Loa can possibly wield, which I'll talk about real briefly before we move on, because I think it does add here. And particularly, we can talk about Razan and Wamsamdi. Razan, when he dies in Battle for Azeroth, the whole setup is that Vol'jin is essentially going to come into his power in Shadowlands. It's going to be offered to Zul'jin to take the mantle, take what's left of Razan's power, and wield that mantle to step in the Loa of King's role. So, like other things, there can be a mantle that a Loa will wear and inhabit. As a matter of fact, that was part of Wamsamdi's deal to empower the leaders of the trolls and their fight against everything that was happening was, you are going to worship me essentially as the primary religion. Even though I'm not actually the god of death, I'm essentially the god of bargaining. And then we are going to go and kill, Muezala, and then I become the god, like the Loa of the dead. On top of the Guardian of the Dead mantle that Wamsamdi already had, on top of the Loa of Graves mantle that Wamsamdi already had, and the current mantle of Loa of Kings that he's wielding until Vol'jin gets back on his now Loa feet and takes over that role, which I'm waiting for that to happen any day now. This seems like a really good expansion, Blizzard, to maybe have Vol'jin make a pop-up. But we've
love to see Vol'jin again. We kind of dropped this story thread, and I feel like he was a popular character, and he had this sort of blip as war chief, and he's come and he's gone, and it's
I would agree. It would be nice to have him back, especially now that we're in Zulaman. We could have like some of the bridging of like the Darkspear are not exactly beloved by the Zandalari. They're not loved by the traditional Armani trolls, but we could start seeing some of the repair. And I talked about this before, and I feel like I'm talking about a lot, and I'll let you guys chime in. One of the things that I thought was really important about the end of the Dragonflight expansion was that the elves were on their way to becoming whole again. They weren't just a disparate group that had no common ground anymore. They have Belemeth, and Belemeth with a world tree is now a meeting place that all of the elves are welcome to. You see Dark Rangers, you see Horde, Alliance, Blood Elves, you see every walk of life welcome there, or unlife, as the case may be, but they're all welcome there. The trolls don't have that. Not really. The Zandalari Empire and the Amani Empire have been at war with each other for ages. I mean, it's one of those things where could you not have a meeting of the leadership at this point? Have Queen Talanji sit down with, and I'm going to forget her name here, help me out, the leader of the Zul'Jan, yeah. Have them sit down and forge a new path forward. Hey, our ancestors hated each other. We don't have to hate each other.
Sorry, Zul'Jara.
Zul'Jan. Yeah, Zul'Jan is his brother. Yeah. We could be chill. We could coexist. We're on the other side of the world. You're over here. This is fine. Let's open trade routes. Let's talk about stories of our people. Do you want me to teach you how to sail? Which also is an interesting point, because if you look at Zul'Aman, there's a giant bridge that goes out into the middle of nowhere that may be part of the Path of Titans, may have been something else. Who knows? The Troll Empire once spanned the entire world, so who knows how big it could be. And I've rambled a lot, so I'll turn it over to you guys if there's any parting thoughts, Eric, or any questions, Liz, that you want more clarification on.
I could see a gathering, a bringing together, maybe not as much as we've been promised, like the elves coming together in Midnight, but it does seem that we're getting more and more of that as we go towards the end of the World Soul Saga, as the beings of Azeroth kind of need to unite and get along and stop having these factions and everything. And then whatever happens after that, maybe we won't just go back to, now these factions aren't getting along again. Maybe we'll have some other cosmic adventure to go on where we won't be able to worry about like what kind of troll you are and whether you're welcome on the spaceship or not. Who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that does it for that question. Hopefully that helps you on your journey into your ascension. Please don't forget us. Maybe you could become the patron Loa of Blizzard Watch. Our next question. Go ahead, Liz.
We could always use a patron Loa of Side Quests.
Ooh.
That's always a thing.
That's fair. I like that. Scribbly, you are now the patron Loa of Quest. It goes in line with your I do any task literally anybody gives me. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Great job, Liz.
I have done some things that it's like you go and you accept the quest and it's like, this does not sound like a good thing that I should be doing, but he's offering experience and a really attractive set of shoulders, so I guess I'm doing it. It just happens. It happens.
All right. Our next question comes from Nabatian. Having done the Harandar part of the campaign, I have a question. Rift of Aln and Alnhara, amazingly slow build-up from the Rift of Aln's first reference to this dramatic revelation, linking it to the goddess/world soul, or retcon deciding to make an old throwaway name now mean something major. This is part of the question. I may be showing my ignorance, and this is already known, and I also know that it could, of course, be the writers retconning all the time, but did we ever know what all was first referred to when we encountered Xavius here? So the Rift of Aln, or Aln in general, when we were introduced to it by Xavius, was always referred to as sort of like this nexus point, this thin point between the dream and reality. And Xavius is very particular in this, and very particular in this choice. And when we're encountering him, we're encountering it from the dream side of things, where he's trying to sort of break into reality from the dream because, well, Xavius no longer really exists. He's a concept, a memory, an entity that no longer has a corporeal form. Well, he can't serve his old god masters or any of the destructive entities or things that he would want to do if he is, just kind of stuck doing nothing but, being a dream. It never went further than that. right? We understood that there was this weird nexus point, that the thin veil was important. There was a reason the old gods were targeting it. There's a reason why when we did the Emerald Dream everything, that it was so important to keep it clean, because those concepts like the Il'gynoth could have potentially been born into the real world. Matt and I talked about this probably 2 years ago at this point, maybe more, of Il'gynoth being a being of pure thought, not actually ever existing. It was not a mistake that they were viewing themselves as a world tree, or that they were taking on that form in that encounter. A world tree is a very powerful thing, a very well-connected thing that spans not just reality, but all dimensions. And we know this because if we go back and talk about Ganir, the mother tree, it is essentially the WoW equivalent of the Norse tree of everything all's connected at every point in time. It can exist in multiple places. Well, if that tree in the dream had become fully realized and a seed planted in an approximate location, in this case, probably is somewhere in Mulgore, we suspect, then Il'gynoth would have potentially been born into reality. That's kind of what Xavius was going for. Now, what the Harandar campaign does is actually starts breaking down a little bit, not quite, what the Rift of Aln is, who Alnhara is, and sort of a little bit about that. The thing here, and this is going to be the controversial thing, I don't think Alnhara is the world soul. I don't think it's Azeroth. I think it's more directly related to the roots of Teldrassil, because that's the roots that we have above us in Harandar, which I didn't catch the first time I was doing the questing, but I just finished the zone for a second time, doing every single quest, scouring every portion of the zone, mostly because of this question, so thank you. Looking for every hidden tablet, every hidden scroll, every hidden book, and everything seems to reference to the song of Alnhara as emanating from the tree. And with Teldrassil essentially being born from the branches of Ganir, the mother tree that connects everything, and the Rift of Aln being deeper in the ground, closer essentially to the world soul. Why, when you get deeper to the world soul, in that wound, in that where the veil is thin, why do they stop hearing the song of Alnhara? You would expect that they would hear more of it. And this starts to beg the question, is the song that was referenced in the War Within that everybody heard, is it actually the song of the world soul, or is it the song of something else? Because again, you have the Arathi guided by this light, guided by the song, they can hear it. The Earthen, the same thing, they can hear the song. Magni was able to hear the song, but they're not as deep as we currently are. They're not as deep as Harandar is. So is it even the same thing? Or is this the song crafted by, in again, tinfoil hat theory here, and we've gone over this a couple times. One of the things that was referenced with world trees in particular is that when they are planted, their roots spread all throughout the world. Like, they're not just localized. They are entire vast root systems that we are making a speculation that covers the entirety of Azeroth. And we've seen some evidence to potentially support that. The tunnels left behind inside of the War Within when we're in, I can't remember the name of the Nerubian zone. I apologize. It's been a long day.
Azj-Kahet?
Thank you. As we're in Azj-Kahet, like the tunnels that are left behind, don't they look like roots that were ripped up? And when we're going into the deeper section where the Harandar are, and they're investigating the Black Blood, there's root systems there. It looks like it's retreating away from this area. But the whole thing is, this is a network potentially of a protective shell around the world soul created by the world trees. But we also know that these trees are living entities, at least in capacity if they have some form of sentience granted to them by Ganir, the mother tree. Ganir was a cosmic entity, is a cosmic, and these being her children or children of her children, they're all interconnected. They all have a will. The Night Elves talk about this. The Druids talk about this. They've been talking about this since Burning Crusade. Like this is something that is like a deep, deep cut where the trees are living entities. It's why, like, when you go to Northrend and you see the fallen world tree that the Serenite's bubbling up in the middle of, and the Firbolg are going absolutely insane in, they talk about feeling the death of that tree, that its sort of death knell could be heard throughout the entirety of the world. And these are little throwaway lines in quests and books that you don't think about until you start getting into places like this, where it's like, oh no, these are absolutely connected. And if all the trees are this colony and are singing together, is it their song? Is that the goddess that they're talking about? Is Aln the spirit of Teldrassil that burned? Is that why they stopped hearing the song? Like, all these different layers to it, I think, is what makes it very, very interesting, at least to me. But we still are unsure what Alnhara actually is. Is it the spirit of Teldrassil, which is what my speculation is? Is it something to do with the world soul, or is it an entirely different cosmic entity that we have no real idea of? So that's my wild speculation and some tidbits. Eric, what do you got for us?
I enjoy the speculation because I also didn't immediately think, oh, Alnhara, that's just their name for Azeroth, the world soul. And then I haven't finished every single quest in the zone, but, getting to the area with the rift and the nightmares coming out of it, it's seeing the animations, what creatures are actually coming out of it. Some of them we've seen before. It's like, okay, so some of that makes sense. But while you were talking, I started to fold my own tinfoil hat here, because if the world soul was in this cradle, wrapped in the roots of a world tree, it sounds a lot like something else that we know the world soul has had happen to it, which is that the Titans came upon Azeroth and put their keepers, and the keepers made their earthen and other entities who built the coreway and constructed the manifold around the world soul to keep it safe and do whatever. It sounds a lot like throwing trees at the world and having their roots go down and going around the world soul to, I don't know, influence it or empower it or turn it to life. Sounds a lot like throwing old gods there to put their feelers in to influence it. So I don't know. I've had this on and off. The different cosmic powers are all vying for the world soul, whatever it is, and for whatever reason. And sometimes it makes more sense in my head, and sometimes it makes less. But finding out that there was a literal bunch of roots cradling around what was the world soul, if that's what it is, that's very interesting. I'm here for the theory that we'll find out that Alnara is completely something else, because they, as far as I could tell, don't explicitly say that it is Azeroth. No one says like, oh yeah, that's our word for this when they're talking to somebody in the quests. So I really
and they do reference Azeroth as well. Like, they talk about Azeroth. So like the impression I get is that to the Harandar, these are two very distinct entities. Like, Azeroth is not it's not a foreign term to them, right? Like,
right.
Arena is not like, that's just our word. Like you said, she understands what Azeroth is, and that is not what she's referring to Alnhara as. So it's a fascinating thing, and I think we're going to get way more as this expansion goes on, because as the Harandar are more involved in the goings of the rest of the world, I guess we'll say, their worldview will sort of broaden, and there may be some connecting pieces that will get filled in, because you also have to keep in mind that the Harandar are just essentially coming out of isolation, right? They were called to where they are. They were called to the home beneath the roots. I personally think that they were potentially an offshoot of what night elves were. Like, night trolls that went deep underground stayed underground, because we know night trolls were subterranean at some point before they ventured to the surface and settled where they did and evolved into elves, because they're very much this halfway point between trolls and elves. They're almost like this missing evolutionary step. They're massive like trolls. Trolls are way bigger than elves, but they have a lot of the elf facial features. They have a lot of the elf tendencies. The large ears are there as well. Their connection to nature and the way that they revere it is like a perfect mix of the two. Like you would expect, like the night elves and the trolls, like we just talked about their worship of Loa and how they view nature. It's sort of like this perfect melding of it. They almost slot in perfectly as this like missing link between the two, between those evolutionary steps. And I really want them to meet the last remaining night troll back in Zandalar. I want them to meet him and say, like, and just see, oh yeah, no, we've got memory rocks that depict this, like from ages past. Because that's the other thing, which I think is really neat too. One of the cool things about the area, and I'm sorry, I'm going off on a random tangent here, but the Harandar are just fascinating. The way that they record history is very much akin to how lore walkers do it, and very much incorporates elements almost like the Emerald Dream's dream, right? When you go in, do those quests, and you go and touch sort of like the memory rocks, not only are you activating the latent magic of the paints that are depicting the things, you're overlaying it into the world. You're seeing things that happened, that physically happened, like them hiding from a Titan Watcher, them hiding from Freya.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a massive indicator to me that they're a divergent evolution that was never intended, right? They're hiding from Titan constructs. They're very much natural. They may actually have met or talked with Alun at some point, because Alun is a very nature-oriented spirit. They may have talked with Aenar personally at one point. You never know. Because again, Aenar wasn't as in line with the rest of the Titans and really was all about that wildlife, and their relationship with Alun definitely led towards that as well. So there's tons of different things here that could potentially like really, really widen our view of where the Harandar slot into the world structure. And I think it's going to be really interesting. Oh,
honestly,
go ahead.
It kind of made sense for me for the Harandar to be hiding from the Titans and Titan constructs. I mean, we have seen how, in Dragonflight, we had a kind of big conflict between the different dragons, in that the Titans came in and offered, quotation marks, their gifts and kind of enforced order on some of the dragons. The Titans have their sense of how the world around them should be, and they enforce that as the right way things should be. And so you can see, if the Harandar are here, dedicated to the wildlife, and Azeroth dedicated to the world, that may clash with some of the Titans' goals. And it feels like at some point we're going to really hit home on this conflict between the Titans maybe not being a completely benevolent entity like we've kind of pictured them for many years of Warcraft's history. And, the Harandar did kind of hide from everyone and everything. They hid and they watched. But did they already know something that maybe not everyone knew, that the Titans aren't always benevolent? Certainly, if you're in that quest about them hiding, if you mess up, the Titan constructs are going to attack and kill you. So there's a truth in that does feel like it calls back to some of the things we've seen in Dragonflight, and some things that hopefully your story threads will see something more from. We had Ridicron, who was there rejecting the Titans' gifts, he's kind of in the wind right now. And I'm very interested to see if that essential conflict comes around in any way. And, maybe the Harandar are going to play a part in this, because they are not on the side of the Titans. They didn't reject their gifts like the primal incarnates did, but they certainly avoided any such gifts or influence. So it could be interesting. It could be interesting to see what new tinfoil hats we can put on from here.
Well,
what I want to know
Go ahead,
is we are been talking for a long time about, a lot of the story that we've heard is the Titans version. What are the Titans telling us? What is the truth?
Yeah.
What aren't the Titans telling us? What are the Harandar telling us? We just met them. They trust us a little, but are those like the real most important story rocks that they're showing us how to like experience, or is that part of the story, or are we gonna get more of it later when they really trust us? So I'm keeping that in the back of my mind too.
Yeah,
let's get some more story rocks up in here.
Yeah, I think we need more, but in particular, we have an interesting opportunity as well, right? So, in the memories, the Titan Watcher there, the keeper that you are hiding from, is Freya. Freya is alive. Freya is in Alduar. We don't kill Freya. We can go talk to Freya. Freya owes us one, maybe more. But like, Freya is not an unknown quantity to us. And Freya is extremely important in a lot of things. Formerly, she was the Titanic Keeper that was the protector of all life. That was her domain. That was her purpose, right? She fought against the old god. She was empowered by Anar. She worked alongside Arcadis. She's the one that shoved Therazane, the Stone Mother, into the rocky dimension. She's also the one that created the Emerald Dream, supposedly, during the ordering of Azeroth. And for whatever purpose that was, or either she opened a tunnel to it, or the Emerald Dream is a compact dimension of the nature realm, which we haven't really gone to. And a combination of that and Azeroth's dreaming world soul. She also planted Ganir, the mother tree, atop a very high peak inside of the Emerald Dream, in which, new life flowed from it in waves sweeping across the land. Freya sculpted many pools of life in other locations within the dream, but Ganir was the first, the tallest, and the most radiant. For millennia, it served as a source of healing and balance that extended beyond the dream and into the physical world, acting as a guide for Azeroth's natural. I don't think that's coincidental that the Harandar are tied up with protecting a world tree, summoned by a song to the roots of the cradle, and we're hiding from Freya. Now, if Freya was there to eradicate them or reorder them, they may have assumed as such, but that may not be the case. She may have been on their side, or this could have been after she got Old God mind like linked, and this could be something that happened there. We don't know. So I find this fascinating because we can literally go and just be like, yo, what up? What happened? We saw you hunting these beings. Why did you do that? If you don't tell us, we'll beat you up like we did the other Watchers, because I can do that, right? Like, and I would be very shocked if we don't, because, and this ties in with another question we're gonna do here in a minute. We know we're going back to Northrend, right? Mm-hmm. We know that is on our agenda. They're spending a lot of time redoing Northrend. It's going to get a modernization and a modernized treatment. This is a perfect opportunity to sit these Titan Watchers down and be like, your bosses kind of stink, and we're going to have a new party around here, and your choice is get on board or you're fired, right? Like, we can go and do that, and we can go to Frey and be like, explain yourself. So hopefully we'll get to do that. And to the part where asking if this is a retcon, no, it's not a retcon because it was never set in stone. And that's one of the things that I know Liz absolutely loves about Warcraft lore. Very few things are black and white. Very few things are set in stone. And a lot of them are left vague on purpose because, again, not only are they telling a story and creating a world, it does also still have to fit a game world. And so things may shift and evolve. So not a retcon, just a further expanding of stuff that we already knew about to a small degree. Now getting more information dumped into our brain. All right. Hopefully that answers your question and gives you a little bit of random insight and maybe a little bit of the tinfoil hatting there. This next one comes from Mayron, who sent in quite a number of questions, and we are very grateful for it. and it does relate to this whole Northrend thing. In Midnight, Eversong Woods advances forward in time and is modernized. In The Last Titan, Northrend will also move forward in time and be updated. Looking ahead, which zone or set of zones would you like to see revisited with new stories after a significant time skip? And I've talked a lot, so I'm going to let Eric take first crack at them.
I'm super excited to get back to Northrend and so many of those places. I have to say that in the rest of the world, if we're looking, past that, if we're looking for expansion, even past the World Soul Saga, expansion 13, 14, 15, some of the places that we haven't seen much update on in a while that should have something. I think we'll be headed back to, say, Anchorage. Maybe we'll get Silithus in The Last Titan to figure out what's going on with the sword. The sword is still there. What's going on with the sword? But it's been decades since we really got into Anchorage. We've seen other old gods still have influence after we, quote, vanquish them, unquote. Is there anything happening in there with the, different constructs that are from different entities that have been just kind of sitting around since Cthulhu was vanquished? I'd like to see what's going on in Black Rock Mountain. We got to go a little bit in some of the quests in Midnight and see what's going on with some of that kind of stuff now, but it's in more of a looking back and kind of what's going on there recently. And I had one other big one that I'm trying to remember. Obviously, the places that are really relevant to the Titans will be relevant soon, like Ungoro Crater. I just want to see Stranglethorn Vale. I spent so much time in Stranglethorn Vale when I was leveling. I spent a year in Stranglethorn Vale because I just played World of Warcraft back in 2005, twice a month. And it was just when it came, I was like, oh yeah, I still play that game. I still want to, where am I in that game? What zone am I in? Am I still in Duskwood? And then I'd log in and I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, I'm in Stranglethorn Vale. Still, I'm on level 44 and I still am just I have 10 quests that I still have to do in here. And so, we've got updates to a lot of these zones from Cataclysm, and some of them were bigger than others, but it's been so many years. What kind of things, pulling in from all these expansions with, the Dragonflight coming back and the Dragonflights getting their powers and what does that mean? Where would you see dragons in Eastern Kingdoms? Where would you see some of the battle for the Fourth War? Places we barely heard about. So I think it's all coming. If I have to say honestly, I don't think that there's a part where the World of Warcraft can keep going for a game for very long, leaving any part of the original game untouched. So I'm excited to get to it all.
For me, mine is a little more I don't want to say mundane, but I guess it is. Northrend and Northrend getting updated, fantastic. I'm here for it. Give me playable Tuskar. Anyway, the thing that I actually want to see happen in the world in advance is, believe it or not, almost everything from the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor post-Cataclysm. So Cataclysm changed the world pretty dramatically in a lot of places, and some not. I will say Kalimdor, I think, made out a little bit better than some of the other places, unless you want to talk about Thousand Needles and the lake that became. But the wetlands, Lochmadan, Dunmurrow, Elwyn Forest, all these areas, Westfall, were just devastated because of what happened in Cataclysm, the world events that happened there. A lot of the other places, the Blastlands, Duskwood, not so much. They didn't really get touched. But Westfall has craters and has these elemental torrents that are just happening in the middle of it that we haven't dealt with. We have literal legions of druids and shaman that specialize in this. You can't tell me none of them are going to go to Westfall and Elwyn Forest and be like, let's calm the spirits down and maybe make the ground go, okay, we're better now.
Some of these places, you go there, it's what did the Cataclysm happen yesterday? Let's get a program.
Same thing with like Dunmora, Lochmodan, and the wetlands because of the dam that was there that got broken.
Yeah.
And the devastation that washed out entire villages and towns. I'd like to see recovery efforts over time. It's been literal decades in game at this point where stuff could have been progressing. And this is maybe my only gripe with the game, and I understand it's a game, it's an MMO, this is going to happen, but it's the lack of the world moving forward in all of these different zones. We get it in some, but not all, and it makes the world feel less lived in. And nothing highlights that more than this expansion. Because when you go into Eversong Woods, when you look at Silvermoon City and the Sunwell Plateau, and you look at how all of that is, it feels phenomenal. It feels like an actual lived-in city. It feels like people who pridefully, over decades, rebuilt what was taken from them. And it just feels so much more vibrant than pretty much any other capital city or major city we have ever been in. And I say this even comparing to what we were just in, right? In the Earthen main city, it feels large-ish, but it doesn't feel lived in. And I don't know why. There's apartments everywhere. There's like catwalks and these hot baths on rooftops, and it's a really beautiful setup. It's a really beautiful design, but everything you need is contained in like a 5 square foot radius of like the center point of the forge. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't see the NPCs walking around. In fact, while there are NPCs walking around, it feels less. Silvermoon, there's a dude pulling a cart that you can hop on to take you around the city. Like, they're encouraging you to see this lavish area. And there's these little touches. Like, I actually thought my game was broken at one point. And and because I flew up and whenever I log out of game, and I know I'm not the only one, I tend to find these high out of the way places. And partially it's because that's what my character would do, and I can't break that mindset. And second is because when I load into the game, there's less assets, so I load faster. I found this like hanging garden area, and I'm sure we've all found it. And it had all these like throw cushions everywhere, and like teapots, and these drapes on the side of the floating gazebo in the sky. There's like hedges all around it and encapsulating it. And when you go into it, your sound's muted. Not everything, but like go and open your bag. You don't hear the rustling of your bag. Cast a spell, you don't hear the spell effects. Or if you do, it's really muted. And I occasionally play with, or particularly in raids after I've gone through encounters once, I play with sound off. I'm one of those people. It's just how I am. But before that, and when I'm in the world, I leave sound on. And it freaked me out because I thought I had disabled sound. And it took me, and I'm not ashamed to admit this, probably 20 minutes to realize that it was where I was standing that was causing it. Because as soon as I went elsewhere, sound came back. And then it dawned on me that this little tucked out of the way gazebo in the middle of like the sky, off to the corner, away from the main thoroughfare of the city, it was an intentional design choice. And little tiny things like that just absolutely impress me and make it feel lived in. And I love that. And I want to see more of that. And I know it is a monumental ask. I know that I'm being a selfish gamer. I'm fine with this. I've made peace with it. But I'd love to see that treatment elsewhere. I'd love to see them make use of the spatial audio technology that they're using inside of the game currently that started with The War Within. And if you had headphones on, or you have bidirectional speakers and not just like a soundbar, listen to NPCs talk and spin your character around. They're using spatial audio by default. These are really cool touches that just make the world feel lived in. Go back to the old lands, make them feel lived in. Make them feel like people are rebuilding. Make them feel like life is moving forward and not stuck in cataclysm. That's what I want. And again, I know it's a big ask, but I'd love to see even a little bit of movement towards it, because I think it would be so cool and make the game feel fresh in those areas again. So, Liz, what about you? Do you have an opinion on this?
I mean, I do agree with you in that we have spent so much time destroying the world that I really want to spend some time rebuilding it. But when I think of any one zone, I think of Lordaeron and the Undercity, because I think the undead have a potentially really interesting story that Blizzard has never dug into very well. I mean, maybe in bits and pieces. And the novel before Battle for Azeroth, what was that one?
Before the Storm.
There you go. The name was right there. It starts out with this meeting of undead and their former living families, and kind of the essential pathos of the undead is that they have died and their former loved ones now consider them monsters. Their former homes would throw them out, attack them, kill them. And you have this essential split between them. Do they hang on to their old lives? Do they go back and see where they were? Do they try to reach out to those loved ones? Do they try to hold on to relationships? Are they rejected? Because, yes, they're rejected. They're undead. They're seen as scuttling monsters of the Lich King at best. And they have now come into a space where they're ruled by a council. And, you've got Kalia there, who is an undead, but of a very different sort. Is there a new future for the undead? Is there a new future for the undead combined with the living, where they are accepted as their own entities and are not just these undead monsters? Because the story has frequently painted them as undead equals evil. And even when it's inched into giving them some more subtle characterization, it always falls back to kind of these big trope stories. Okay, they're bad guys. They're going to plague you all. They're going to kill everyone because they're undead. They no longer have human feelings, maybe. And that's just a rough story, especially to players who play undead, to players who are interested in this race. And there's a lot of depth you could go to. Of course, the Undercity itself has been kind of destroyed a second time. We've cleaned it up a little. But what does the future look like for them?
Yeah.
What does the Undercity look like? Because they've kind of embraced the wreck and ruin of the Undercity. But what happens when the Forsaken build? What happens when they see a future beyond death?
Imagine walking into the city of Lordaeron and going into the former throne room, seeing the throne gone and replaced with a table set into the middle of the room where the desolate council, the ruling body of the Forsaken, have, they will govern in the light instead of the muck of the sewers. Imagine a city of Lordaeron where the former residents have rebuilt. They have their trade out of the gutter. Like you said, they embraced they embraced that desolation, really. And they made it a core part of their identity. But now Kalia is back. Kalia, who is a direct bloodline descendant of their lord, right, is a symbol of hope to what they have lost, is among their number. And yes, she's not exactly forsaken, but she's not so dissimilar, and she doesn't seek to rule. She seeks to make her people whole. And what would that look like if they actually started functioning as, and I hate to say it like this, and Forsaken players, please forgive me, but dragging themselves out of the darkness into the light to present themselves on full display without any of the shame that has essentially plagued them from the very moments they crawled out of the earth to go forth and break free of the Lich King's control and fight back against him. What does that look like when they reclaim their place among society, which is the angle, the trajectory their story is taking? You're absolutely right, Liz, and that is a fantastic call out. I love it.
I mean, the one place they've told this story pretty well in a couple places. One of them is, I think, with Lillian Voss. which if you dig deep into her story, if you've done all of her quests, particularly, I want to say in Battle for Azeroth, there was a lot of background you got on her if you did all of the story quests she was in, which was great, this kind of concept. But the place where this feeling has been catalyzed best is somewhere that has nothing, well, not directly the Forsaken. It's the Death Knight starting experience, where they really nailed home that you have died and been resurrected as a monster, which is the essential thing to the Forsaken as well, except they don't have quite a cause in the way the Death Knights do. The Death Knights have been brought back in control. The Forsaken have been brought back. And there's kind of that question is why, how, where do we go from here? But the Death Knight starting experience is, even today, it's some of the really great storytelling in WoW and some really great emotional storytelling in WoW. And it's because it goes to this key problem with being undead, which is you are back and you are a monster, and what's your relationship with the world now? You know, when you get to the end of the Death Knight starting zone, you go into your capital city and people insult you, people throw fruit at you, kind of thing. You have to walk all the way through the city to the faction leader and talk to them and say, "Hey, I want my place in this world back. I want to help." And even today, if you take a Death Knight and you go into Silvermoon, the guards are like, "Where is your Dark Master?" And it's like, I think Bolvar is still an ice crown. I don't know. I don't keep tabs on him. But that haunts, a Death Knight player. And they nail it home from the very beginning, and they continue to do it today. I think Death Knights have some of the best storytelling in World of Warcraft. But part of the Death Knight story is the Forsaken story, and they have not really had as much of that as they could. And it's because so often, when you start to feel like that pathos, then they go back and paint them as enemies. Particularly when you do Before the Storm, where you had this kind of soft moment, like, can they reconnect with their human friends? And then you have Sylvanas. Sylvanas is the ultimate bad guy now. And it's just tough. I'd like to see them get an expanded story and just to see what's the next step here. And they have been pushing that story a little. I'd like to see more.
Now I've got goosebumps and I want to go roll a new Forsaken character tonight.
Yeah, so I mean, again, great call out and great points, Liz. See, this is why we brought you along. But I think that's going to do it for us today, friends. I do want to thank you for joining us on this journey. I do want to remind you that Blizzard Watch is made possible due to your generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast with a Q&A and ads-free site experience. I would also like to remind you that you can send us questions, and I encourage you actively to do so. You can send those into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us up on Discord. We have the Q&A Podcast Questions channel. Same rules apply. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you can send us those questions on the Patreon Q&A Podcast Questions channel. We tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. And I would also like to throw out there that we have a book guide on our website, and I highly encourage you to go and look at it, especially if you're interested in some of the stories that we're talking about here or some of the points that we are referencing from way older books all the way through. The book guide can be found at blizzardwatch.com/warcraft-books. Highly recommend going through and checking it out. And also would like to remind you that we are available on all forms of social media, or most of them. I don't even remember how many there are right now. But we are Blizzard Watch on Instagram, Facebook, and Mastodon at gamepad.club. BlizzardWatch.com on Bluesky. Blizzard Watch Podcasts on YouTube. At blizzard.watch on TikTok, which I highly recommend because Liz and Anna will generally pick the most unhinged things that Matt, myself, or Eric or anybody talks about and throw it on there. Great. But follow there for our latest news as well as anything that's happening with the site. We really want to see you there. And don't forget to say hey. We like you. But with that, folks, we'll see you next week.